Arkansas students return to the classroom this month, while a governor's commission seeks ways to make them safer. In Conway, hundreds of jobs are at risk. Can they be saved? And in Northwest Arkansas, a slice of Hollywood brings in the dollars. Arkansas Week is next.
Local broadcast of Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the award-winning Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Arkansas's largest major newspaper, bringing you local, national, and international news since 1819. By the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Arkansas Week. I'm Lance Turner of Arkansas Business, sitting in for Steve Barnes. Well, students from Arkansas returned to school this month, just weeks after a commission created by Governor Asa Hutchinson handed down a preliminary list of recommendations to improve school safety. The governor created the 18-member commission in the aftermath of a school shooting in Parkland, Florida, a shooting that killed 17 students and teachers. That commission's work continues. It's set to deliver final recommendations by the end of November. The Arkansas School Safety Commission, its work and its findings are where we begin tonight. Joining us is Dr. Cheryl May, the director of the University of Arkansas System's Criminal Justice Institute and chairman of the Arkansas School Safety Commission. Dr. May, thanks for coming in today.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We had a busy week at the start of the week because we had U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions in town to discuss a range of issues. He was in Garland County appearing at a school safety discussion at Lake Hamilton High School. You were there. You took part in that discussion. What did you learn from that discussion on school safety?
Well, as a commission, we hadn't visited Lake Hamilton. And so I was very interested to see and to learn more about their program. And I was very enlightened. Their program is not about arming teachers. It's about providing that armed presence with administrators, support staff, and they're also in the process of hiring an SRO. So they are definitely taking a layered approach, which is one of the things that we talk about in our preliminary report on the commission.
An SRO is a school resource officer.
Yes, sir. I'm very sorry.
No, that's okay. That is a person who is probably a law enforcement officer or someone who has that background, who is trained to use weapons in that case.
Yes, but they're a lot more than just a law enforcement body in a school. They are extremely important in the prevention end of things, because the way they're taught, and we do teach them through the Arkansas Center for School Safety at CJI, that they're also mentors, they're teachers, and they're informal counselors. You know, these individuals, very good ones, develop bonds with our kids, and there's a certain degree of trust there. And that's important in a number of different respects. Not only, you know, they can turn kids around that might be going down the wrong road. They can also, kids might feel comfortable coming to them in the event that they may know something about a threat. But they also help build trust between those kids and law enforcement, which is a very, very long-term impact.
You and the other commissioners have been working since March on this project to provide recommendations on how to improve school safety, specifically here in Arkansas. What was the charge from the governor? What specifically did he ask you to do?
Yeah, he asked us to identify some of the things that are going on in the state, identify some best practices, and help us as a state fill in the gaps on what we need to do. And so since the middle of March, you know, the 18 of us have worked diligently to try to put together all those various pieces. And then at the end of July, we did come up with our, or at the beginning of July, we did provide him with our preliminary report.
And that's a list of nearly 20 recommendations. We can't go into all of them,
No.
unfortunately. I know you'd love to, because
Yeah.
you are a numbers and details person.
Yes, sir.
But what were kind of the top recommendations, and what issues do those kind of seem to coalesce around?
Yeah, one of the really big issues focused around mental health for our kids. There was a study that came out through the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And basically what it says was, there were 39 states that were, the kids were asked a variety of questions, 12 to 17 years old, and we came out pretty high, number 1 and number 2 of those 39 states, and how kids felt like they were bullied on campus, and the use of drugs and other things that give a general sense that our kids are in crisis. And bullying was pretty high up there on the list as well. And it's really important that we try to identify these kids and try to be able to help them and intervene on their behalf in instances like this. And so we've looked at things like youth mental health first aid, which is basically a national training program that would allow everybody in the school to become more familiar with what are the various signs and symptoms of somebody that's in crisis or having a mental health issue, and how can they actually de-escalate crisis situations. And the whole idea is to get our kids the kind of mental health resources they have. Also along this line, the governor also had talked about the role of school counselors and how important they are. And the Public School Student Services Act of 1991 basically says that 75% of a counselor's time should be spent counseling and 25% on other activities. And what we're finding out, it's a little bit flip-flopped.
It's completely
so
there's
been,
down.
yes, there's been a lot of discussion on that. We also talked about site safety assessments, doing behavioral threat assessments, and then one of the other big things, of course, that's gotten a lot of attention is, we as a group feel that this is an unprecedented time for our kids. And that we feel that armed presence in the schools is very important. These incidents happen very rapidly, and the more quickly that somebody can get there, the more lives can be saved. So what we have done as a commission is that we have actually looked at a variety of different alternatives with the basic idea that every school is going to be different. Arkansas, we are very, very diverse, and being able to have options, but also being able to have the information that they need in order to make those decisions. One of the top things that most folks that we've talked to focus on is the school resource officers, which we've talked about before. We currently have 316 based on the census that the Arkansas Center for School Safety did for last school year, and we'll do another one. About 66% of our school districts have school resource officers, but as you know, there are can be many buildings and many campuses within a district. So another option is try to provide law enforcement presence in a wide variety of other ways, including having a room, an actual office space on that campus where an officer can go in and sit and be able to do their paperwork, or a deputy can accomplish a variety of different things while also being there. There are law enforcement agencies, because that relationship between the schools and law enforcement is just, if you're going to do a comprehensive program, it's got to include law enforcement in so many of those. And so particularly for the rural schools where you don't have bigger agencies that are closer, being able to have those sheriff's offices or those small departments, have somebody walk through the building unannounced periodically, sit down and have lunch with the kids. So those are some of the law enforcement pieces. And then there are some schools that have gone down the road of arming administrators and,
Right.
and staff,
Right.
as well as security personnel.
So a lot of this reaction has been, I think, about around money in terms of how will these school districts be able to pay for these kinds of things. Obviously, that's not up to the commission to determine.
Correct.
These recommendations will go to the governor, and then the governor and other lawmakers could do what they will with it.
That's correct.
What would be, in the final moments that we have, what are some of the things that you are working toward now in the final weeks of preparing this? You have to turn something in at the end of November.
Sure.
What are the things that you're doing now?
Sure. We're still trying to flesh out some of the information we had in the preliminary report because it's just that. It's a preliminary report.
Right.
And there were some things that, some areas in the prevention category. There's also recovery. Because when you look at school safety, it's five-pronged. It's prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. You know, we don't want to really have to think about recovery, but it is
in the event that something happens.
In the event that something happens, how the kids get reunited with their parents and
Right.
make sure that that's done safely is critically important. So we're trying to expound on some of those areas as well as fine-tune some of the areas that we've already presented.
All right. Dr. Cheryl May, thanks for coming in. That's all the time we've got, but we'll continue to watch the Commission's work.
Great. Thanks again for taking interest.
You bet. Thank you. And we will be back in just a moment. Welcome back to part 2 of our program tonight, a look at economic development and jobs in Arkansas. And we start with a closely watched job situation here in Conway. The Kimberly-Clark plant, which we've learned in recent weeks is at risk at closing, jeopardizing about 350 jobs there. Joining us to talk about that and some other things, Brandy Hinkle, the Director of Communications for the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, Clint O'Neill, the Executive Vice President of Global Business at the AEDC, and Christopher Crane, who is Arkansas's Film Commissioner. Thanks to you guys for coming in this evening. Clint, Kimberly-Clark has 2 plants in central Arkansas, one in Conway, one in Maumelle, and the company has been working through a restructuring plan this year, trying to save about $500 million before the year 2021. To do that, it has said it could lay off around 5,000 people throughout its entire footprint globally and close some plants, and we learned last month that its Conway operation, nearly 50 years old, could be among those on the chopping block. What's the latest in terms of what we know about what's happening in Conway?
Well, that's right, Lance. In January, when they made their announcement of the corporate downsizing, we were told that both plants were safe in the Arkansas network, Maumelle and Conway. We have a great relationship with Kimberly-Clark. We look to maintain that. However, a few weeks ago, we were notified that the Conway, Arkansas facility is a part of a 30-day evaluation. We've been working closely with Kimberly-Clark. However, indicators are not good for the future of the Conway plant. We have heard from employees about the offer for early retirement buyout packages. We've heard from vendors about the contracts they have coming to a close. So we're proactively engaging with Kimberly-Clark. However, they seem to be more engaged with Wisconsin. Wisconsin's looking at passing a major legislation that's unprecedented, and for us, we're proactively taking the opportunity to do all that we can to save these jobs.
So yeah, so the Wisconsin situation, they've got plants there that are also, I guess at one point had been considered to be on the chopping block up for closure. The unions there granted some concessions, and that is what seems to have reopened all of this discussion in Wisconsin, and it seems to be kind of an either-or situation. Is that correct?
Well, 2 things. The union just passed some pretty major concessions on a tier structure, but some union members taking up to a 20% wage cut in order to save their jobs. This union contract is contingent upon state legislation based on the Foxconn project that Wisconsin passed not too long ago. So this legislation would provide up to $200,000 per job to save these jobs. So up to $117 million for adding no new jobs, for the retention of 600 jobs. Even allows them to lay off up to around 7% of those jobs and retain that. That's absolutely unprecedented. The state of Arkansas, we want to be aggressive, but we also want to be responsible.
Yeah, that seems to be, there's the debate always, you know, how much money do you spend to bring in a thing, and then how much is that thing worth? Was that investment work, or did that investment work? What can you do in a situation like this? You don't want to be in an arms race where you're outgunned. What is the strategy here? How can you negotiate with a company that obviously is paying more attention to something happening in the northern part of the country than maybe what's happening here?
Sure, Lance. Well, we compete for jobs every day, but we don't buy jobs. You know, the state of Arkansas has had a balanced budget for over 70 years. So it's a mix of being responsible. When we evaluate an incentive package to any company, whether that be a recruitment project or a retention project, we're looking at the cost-benefit ratio. We're looking at being a good steward with taxpayer dollars and having a good return. Again, the legislation in Wisconsin seems to be absolutely unprecedented in the field of economic development to provide that level of incentives for the retention of jobs. Our strategy is to appeal to Kimberly-Clark on a long-term basis. There are a lot of good stats that have recently come out. Recently, CNBC came out with their top states for doing business. The lowest business cost state in the United States is Arkansas. That's an objective measure.
Right.
That's looking at property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, wages, logistics. We're appealing to Arkansas's business climate, the positive momentum under the Hutchinson administration. We're appealing to being close to their largest customer, Walmart, a company that's homegrown, Fortune 500 company, largest company in the world, in Arkansas's backyard. We're appealing to our right-to-work status and how that plays out with a non-union plant.
Right.
We have a great workforce that they've been satisfied with, and that we hope that they look long-term for success in Arkansas.
Let's say the worst happens. Unemployment in Arkansas is at a historic low. How do we go about filling that void in Conway? 350 people come on the market instantly.
Sure, it'd be absolutely unfortunate. However, there are a lot of great manufacturing companies in the state of Arkansas and central Arkansas. The skill sets from those employees at Kimberly-Clark would be of value. We would work closely with Kimberly-Clark to hopefully add new product lines to their Maumelle facility. Again, they're satisfied with their employees, so hopefully there would be some opportunities there. But also we would work with the governor's dislocated employee task force to make sure that there are jobs that can be found for those other employees.
All right, moving on to something else, some different news out of Northwest Arkansas this week. Arkansas has a film business, and we shoot films here. We make films and we make television series. We just are wrapping one in Northwest Arkansas, True Detective, an HBO series wrapping season 3. You guys had a media day in Madison County to talk with the show's creators and stars. This was a big, AEDC announced this production last year to some fanfare. This was a good get, I think, for AEDC in the state of Arkansas, in your view. What's the impact from a production like that in Arkansas?
Well, I think that there's, first of all, there's a direct impact. You know, the amount of dollars that they're spending in the local economy up there is just, you know, unheard of, especially in Arkansas. It's the largest production in the history of the state.
Okay.
Then, you know, the ancillary impact. You know, I think that the foundation that this has laid for our crew base, the foundation that it lays for tourism, you know, and so you start to think about all of those tentacles of the industry. And Brandy was on set the other day, and I think, you know, she, you know, was there when Mahershala Ali was talking about his experience, and you can probably attest to that, right? And yeah,
yes, he told a story about the day he moved to Fayetteville,
right,
from the airport to the house, and he said he got out to walk around a little bit, and someone a few blocks over hollered and waved and said, "We're so glad you're here." And he said that's not the reception you receive in a lot of areas. And and he talked about the people and how warm and welcoming, friendly and professional they've been, the locals that they've hired. And he feels like the Ozarks really plays a terrific role in this season, almost like another character.
Right.
So we're really excited about how Arkansas will be portrayed. You know, people will be exposed to the beauty of the Ozarks, and hopefully other productions will see how great it is to work in Arkansas, and so we'll be able to bring some more to the state.
Right.
The producer had a lot of great things to say, as well as the writer, that, you know, it's so authentic to the story that they're telling. But it's also very easy to manipulate, you know, if they do production with studio stuff. Again, they were just so complimentary of the people, their work ethic, and the things that they have brought to the production.
Just like any other business, you're competing with other states for this kind of business. I know Georgia has a pretty robust film industry going on there right now. I think Louisiana, our neighboring state to the south, is pretty heavily involved in some of that. How is Arkansas equipped to compete with states like that that are doing big business in film and TV?
And so and that's multi-tiered.
Right.
You know, I think that, you know, we compete every day in topography, and I think that, you know, from tip to tip, we're able to sell a state that within an hour drive, you change topography really unlike any other place. And so there's a beautiful canvas to paint upon. Now, having said that, I think that there are some really large incentive programs out there that we, I think, would be, it would put us in trouble. We want to make sure that we're revenue neutral. You know, as Clint spoke about with Kimberly Clark, you know, we have a fiduciary responsibility as well. We have a Revenue Stabilization Act. We want to make sure that we don't overstep. Louisiana got into, you know, some difficulties in closing down two-year colleges, et cetera, and really jumped in too heavily in the film industry. And so we have to make sure that we, you know, can service the industry, but that we also service our taxpayer and our tax base. And so we want to make sure that we recruit projects that are good for Arkansas, that don't show us in a bad light. We want to make sure, and not to say that we're in a censor business, but we want to make sure that it's a good investment for the state, something that's going to have distribution, something that will be seen, and something that, you know, highlights our bucolic, you know, atmosphere and the topography. And so, you know, it's kind of a dichotomy. What do we, you know, there are large incentive programs, so we're not going to really want to play in that pool. We have too many other things. But we do have a good incentive program, and we have something that with, you know, customer service and with the other ancillary benefits of Arkansas, low cost of doing business, is something that we can compete. And we're able to, at this point, I think, compete with anybody in the country, especially for location shooting. And that's what this is. They wanted to be on location. They wanted to shoot in the atmosphere and be there in the woods. This isn't all green screen. There's some of that. You know, in every production out. That's correct. But, you know, a lot of this is on set, you know, at location, and it really doesn't get much better than Arkansas. So I think we can compete with anybody.
So what are the incentives like then? What are there special things that are set up just for the film industry, or do you have other incentives in your toolkit that sort of apply to this kind of thing as well? So
there are some crossover programs that we've been able to look at in the past, and you know, perhaps we'll be able to use. Right now we have a Digital Product and Motion Picture Incentive Act that's at 20% on goods and services with an additional 10% labor force credit for our Kansans, which then entices these production companies to use local labor. And that's what it's all about, is keeping the tax base here. It's a rebate. And right now, you know, I'll be very, you know, blunt, it's unfunded. And what we're going to try to do is we're looking at ways to fund the program so that it establishes a recurring, predictable funding source for the future. We've got a great foundation, and if we're able to use the incentive program that we have, you know, coupled with some creative ways to keep those productions coming back, then I think that we can compete all day long.
What's the better thing to have? The productions that come in like from an HBO or direct from Hollywood, or the stuff that's sort of homegrown? I mean, we've seen in the recent years some Arkansas filmmakers, Jeff Nichols among them, some other projects like that are sort of spring up here in a way. Are there things in place to sort of nurture that along, and what would you rather have, or does it even matter?
You know, I think that a combination of the two is smart business for the state, you know, because you take a production like HBO's True Detective, and, you know, they are bringing in, you know, some of their keys, which are the heads of the departments, and for our local labor to be able to be taught, you know, under the tutelage of some of those people is extraordinary. They're being mentored by some of the best people in the industry. They're working with Daniel Sackheim and Scott Stevens and, you know, some of the best producers in the industry, and I think that that's invaluable. But also, we have to, I think that it's incumbent upon us to quit exporting the content makers and export the content. And so we want to make sure that these kids coming out of college right now, these young adults, have an industry in which they can make a living, but do it in a place that they love. And so that's very important. I think that growing the local production companies also lends to backlot for us, which productions, when they're coming from out of state, look for as well. So they're looking for production companies with which to partner. And so it's kind of a chicken or the egg question, but I think that we have to have both.
Right. So what's next for Arkansas on Film?
My gosh, we have a lot of projects. You know, of course, like any project, we can't really talk about them yet. But I think that we've got a lot of things coming down the road that are going to be exciting. You know, for the state of Arkansas, we have some local production companies in the state right now that are really producing some just fantastic content, and local filmmakers. And so I think that we've got a, you know, once again, we have a foundation in the industry that we haven't had before. You know, we've won the national championship with True Detective, so to speak, and now we're going to try to build upon that.
All right. Brandy and Clint and Christopher from the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, thanks for coming in to talk about kind of a range of things this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Local broadcast of Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the award-winning Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Arkansas's largest major newspaper, bringing you local, national, and international news since 1819. By the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.